They gave them independence. Then they handed them a bill. Not a metaphorical bill, a literal one, with interest rates, repayment schedules, and conditions attached that would take generations to pay off. And if the newly independent nation refused to sign, no hospitals got built, no roads, no schools. The money simply went somewhere else. This is how the debt trap works, and once you see the mechanism, you cannot unsee it. Here's what they never teach you about decolonization. When a colonial power finally leaves a country after a century of extracting its resources, destroying its local economies, and dismantling any indigenous institutions that could rival European ones, that country is left with nothing. No capital, no infrastructure, no functioning bureaucracy. Just a flag and a border on a map that some British administrator drew in 1884. And into that vacuum walks the International Monetary Fund. The IMF was created in 1944. Officially, its purpose is global financial stability. What it actually does is offer loans to struggling nations and attach conditions to those loans that guarantee the borrower stays struggling. These conditions are called structural adjustment programs. And the list of requirements is always the same. Cut public spending, privatize state assets, devalue the currency, open the market to foreign competition, and remove trade protections. In practice, what this means is the following. A newly independent African or Latin American nation, desperate for capital, takes the loan. Then it dismantles its own infant industries to satisfy the conditions. Foreign corporations, most of them based in the same countries that just finished colonizing it, flood in and buy up the privatized assets at rock-bottom prices. The local population gets austerity. The foreign investors get the ports, the mines, the utilities. Ghana, Jamaica, Argentina, Ecuador, Zambia. The same story, different geography. Zambia is worth dwelling on. By the 1990s, Zambia had followed IMF structural adjustment conditions to the letter. It cut subsidies, privatized its copper mines, opened its borders. Foreign firms took ownership of the mines. The profits left the country. Zambia's poverty rate went up. The IMF called this a transition period. Economists in Washington called it difficult but necessary reform. The Zambian people called it what it was. And here's the psychological layer that makes this system so durable. It doesn't look like coercion. Nobody is pointing a gun. The indebted nation signed the agreement. It technically has sovereignty. It can technically say no. But what it actually has is a choice between bad and catastrophic. And systems that offer that kind of choice aren't offering freedom. They're manufacturing consent. This is precisely what Foucault was describing when he talked about power operating through institutions rather than through visible force. The colonizer doesn't need to be present. The debt is present. The conditions are present. The threat of credit downgrade is present. The colonial infrastructure has simply been replaced with financial infrastructure, and the extraction continues on schedule. By 2023, African nations were spending more money servicing external debt than on healthcare, more on debt repayment than on education. The continent that has more natural resources per square mile than any other region on Earth is net transferring wealth outward every single year. That is not an accident. That is architecture. The debt trap isn't a conspiracy. It doesn't require anyone to sit in a room and cackle. It just requires people who benefit from the existing order to keep defining what responsible economic policy looks like, and to keep offering loans to countries with no other options. They didn't need to keep the colonies. They just needed to keep the debt.